Hi everyone, welcome to episode 5 of the Wild Learners channel. Today I'm here with my friend Jenna, and we're going to be discussing STEAM and STEM activities in the outdoor classroom. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First, we're going to start talking about what is experiential learning, because STEAM and STEM really come from experiential learning. And experiential learning is really the process of learning through experience, so those hands-on projects. And there's definitely some key aspects to experiential learning that you want to include when you're doing these learning experiences. And one resource that I found online that I really liked and something that I learned in school was Kolb's cycle of experiential learning. And it has 4 key things that has to be included in it to be experiential learning. And that is concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. So those are the 4 main things that you want to have, which is perfect for STEAM and STEM learning. And we're going to talk more about that here in a minute as we start going into different things that you can do in your classroom with those. Now, if you're not familiar with the STEAM and STEM acronyms, we're going to discuss that a little bit. They're not very... All right, so STEAM and STEM are not very different. And if you're not familiar with those terms, we're going to talk about them a little bit here. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And STEAM is the exact same thing, except they add the arts. So you have science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. And these are really important core things as we're learning through education. A lot of the fields that are going to be available to students when they graduate are going to be in these fields. We know that these are going to be the best paying fields, and these are fields that are going to be really important for our development as a culture. So we really want to make sure that kids are getting engaged and really feel like they have the capability of doing these types of learning. So we're going to be talking with Jenna, who is the eco-literacy coordinator at a local Montessori school here in Indiana. And she's going to be talking about how she does that with her class in the outdoor setting. So if you're interested in learning more about what she's doing and how you can implement that in your classroom, make sure you stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So I'm here with Jenna, and I'm going to give Jenna a chance to introduce herself to you folks.
So I am the eco-literacy coordinator at Oak Farm Montessori School, and my job is essentially to teach environmental education to students from primary all the way to high school. So I work with almost all the students, because we have infants and toddlers, but I don't work with them. Their outdoor time is just going for walks, and it's just not that involved with me. I have 2 different kinds of classes that I teach. I teach solid, like every week we have the same class, and then I do optional work because it's a Montessori school, so we do choice work. So what we call eco-literacy at our school is oftentimes choice work. So the students can choose to come, or they can say, no thank you, I have other work I have to do today. And then I have some classes that happen every week, weekly, and usually the teachers, for them, that's their prep time, so they can get their materials in their classroom prepped. I think that depending on the age level, it really changes what we do.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So if you want, I could describe how it changes.
I think you should definitely do that, because
okay.
I think a lot of our viewers are going to be interested in seeing how those different parts of STEAM connect to child development and appropriation with that.
It's very thoughtfully put together. So for example, primary, we do Kinder Forest, and that is really the essence of science, learning how to observe, learning how to make predictions based on things they notice, or even just simple things like following seasonal changes and patterns. And like I always say, just learning how to be happy outdoors and love the outdoors. And that is something that's really special to our students, because as they get older, that's all they want to do is be outside.
Yep. Once they get that exposure, it's pretty hard to get them to come back out inside.
I always joke around and say I'm the cool aunt at school, because when I go into the classroom and they see me, they're like, is it first years this week? Is it second years? Like, nobody doesn't not want to come with me. And it's like, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So then we go to, and they also do outdoor work with primary. So they pull out students from the classrooms. We have a primary outdoor specialist who, that's his job, is he pulls students out, and they spent an hour and a half, which is a work cycle for them, doing outdoor work, which could look like sweeping the porch or going out and investigating salamanders in the forest or whatever other seasonal interesting thing is happening. Working in the garden, pulling weeds, planting seeds, anything that would just be like work is done during primary outdoor work.
Do you guys ever do anything like fort building or?
So that happens a lot in Kinder Forest.
Yep.
Kinder Forest is very hands off for us.
Okay.
We are very Montessorian in that we stand back and observe the students. When they ask us questions, we ask them back to them in a way where they can answer it themselves, or at least we can give them resources for them to figure out what the answer is. But it's very hands off, and the role of the teacher in Kinder Forest is more just making sure that the students aren't like taking off on us, or they are really good about respecting our boundaries. We set boundaries. So it's very much self-guided, and that's where the students are learning how to like be cooperative together, how to communicate, how to, you know, like be excited about something and bring their friends in. Or if they're having a hard time moving a log, like how many people do you need to figure out how to move the log? Because I'm not going to help.
Right. Yeah, I love that, because we talked about in an earlier episode about how real learning takes place when teachers act more as a guide, and we're just giving kids the tools they need, and we're allowing them to use those tools and become the teacher, right? That's true learning. So I love that.
And because we have multi-age classrooms, you can really see that beautifully when you have the kindergartners helping the 3-year-olds that just came into class, you know, and they're new to class and they don't know what's going on in Kinder Forest, you know, or the older students that are better at climbing logs will do the climbing, and then the little kids who are 2 or 3 years younger than them will want to do it with them, and they will also help. So it's quite it is really natural to not be hands-on in Kinder Forest, and that's how it should be.
Agreed.
Outdoor work is a little bit more guided, so depending on what's going on or even the interest of the students, like there might be a little bit more curriculum-based choices on the work that they do. So both of those graduate to different programs. So when they move up to the next level, which is lower elementary, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, they do eco-literacy with me, which is, again, outdoor work. And what I do with them is really dictated by the seasons. It could be raking leaves and making a giant pile to jump in. It could be, right now we've been doing a lot of work looking for salamanders because it's salamander season. At least that's what I call it.
Oh, yes.
And they love that. It could be exploring the frozen wetland. It could be weeding the garden, or right now we've been saving a lot of seeds, and we've been drying herbs and doing all that. Like, this is outdoor work, eco-literacy work. And they don't know it, but they're learning a lot while they're doing it, and they love it.
Well, and the great thing about what you're doing is they so naturally tie into what the Indiana science standards are for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, talking about weather change and plant cycles and things like that.
And
they're getting a hands-on experience with that because they're interacting with it.
And the other role that I play kind of in lower elementary is a lot of times the teachers will come up to me and be like, Jenna, this is the unit we're teaching right now. Do you have anything we could use? For example, a couple weeks ago, they were learning about parts of the plant, and they were talking about leaves, and they asked if there were leaves in the garden that they could go eat. And I was like, sure, let me go show you all the edible leaves in the garden that you can go eat right now. What's left in the garden anyway. And the teachers took them to the garden, and they harvested a bunch of stuff, came back in the classroom and did their unit, and they love it. Like, the students love that ability to have this, essentially it's their outdoor classroom, and that's how I refer it.
Right. Yeah.
I always tell them, like, this isn't playtime, because that's, you know, like, sometimes they're like, are we gonna get to play? I'm like, nope, this is work time. It's part of your work cycle. I pull you out of your classroom. Instead of doing indoor works like math or reading or writing, you're doing outdoor work, and it can be whatever it is. I hardly ever have students that say no unless they're behind on something and their teachers are telling them that they have to finish like certain works by the end of the week.
Oh, yeah.
But so it's very much very natural in the sense that like we're really tuning into the seasonal changes and what's going on. But again, like sneaking in that curriculum
Right.
that they don't even know, you know.
Right, exactly.
And then I do teach an adventure class. We call it adventure, but it's really like the graduation of Kinder Forest.
Oh,
and
okay.
so it's a lot of playtime in the woods, but we incorporate a lot more science and actual like curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And I sneak in the arts in there too.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of art.
So what format do you use? So when I'm outside with my kids, I really like the idea of choice as well, because I want them to have the buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll maybe have like 3 or 4 different stations set up and they can choose which stations to go to. Is that similar to what you do, or do you have like a whole group activity that you're doing?
We usually, just because we have 24 students,
Mhm.
which is a lot different from your school.
Right, exactly.
It's harder to do that. There's 2 teachers to 24 students. That's usually the ratio that we work with. And so I tend to I listen to the students. I often ask them like what they're interested in. And if I notice that they're really into something, we'll spend more time in it.
Okay.
And we'll dive deeper. So at Oak Farm, we always say, sometimes you don't get a choice. And you just have to do what everyone's doing. But we try to build in those choices for them.
Yeah.
And generally, they really get it. Like, just, it's also the way you teach, the way
Right.
you present the information. They get really excited
Yes,
about it.
exactly.
There's always 1 or 2 students that are like, meh, but then you try to capture their interest later on in something else.
Right.
So,
I couldn't agree with you more.
The way I teach the class is we have a yearly focus, because students are in that classroom for 3 years. So the first year we do plants, the next year we do animals, and the last year we do survival and orienteering. So that's like, because it's what historically the class has been. But that doesn't mean that if there is, like right now, we're doing salamanders, we paused survival.
Yeah.
And we're diving deep into what the salamanders are doing because they're there.
Right.
And like, you just take the opportunity.
Love
And
it.
so I've built in those breaks into the curriculum. So we
Mhm.
cover the things I want to, knowing that there's going to be times when we're like, okay, we got to stop.
Right.
It's snowing out and we have great sledding and we're going to go sledding.
Right. I love that, because you don't want to miss those aha moments, right?
Mhm.
Because you can't replicate some things.
Right.
And
And
so-
it makes it memorable. And that's
Right.
what you want.
Right.
At that age, you're really getting those kids outside, loving every minute of it, and
Right.
sneaking in that curriculum, and they don't even realize they're learning.
Right.
It's like it's a very natural way
Right.
to learn and become scientists. Today, I was telling my students that we found some really cool salamanders, and there's a chance that they're the endangered blue spotted salamanders.
Oh, yes. That's what we have here,
And
too.
like the outdoor specialist at our school has connections with someone who's actually doing salamander research.
Oh,
And so
very
he said,
cool.
if you have the hybridized ones, which the one we sent a picture of one that we found the other day, he said that's a hybridized one. If you have that, chances are high that you have the actual endangered ones.
Mhm.
And so we asked the students if they were interested in inviting the scientist to our school from Minnesota, who said he would totally come
Whoa, that's
to go
that's
look for
awesome.
these rare salamanders. And the students were all over it. And I told them, I said, you guys, that's citizen science. When
Yeah.
you guys who are not educated in salamanders go out and help find these salamanders and say, we have them here, we need to protect our forest because we have this really cool thing,
Right.
you know, like, and they get really excited about it. 'Cause
Right.
everyone wants to have a special salamander on in their
Right.
forest.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, but anyway, so we have adventure and we do a lot of, that's when I build in a lot of curriculum. You
Yeah.
know, and we do, and they do other things. For example, we have a lot of rituals in class where we come in because it's really hard at that age to get them to see, like, we're in the forest, they want to play, they want to
Right.
build forts the whole time, but it's like, this is actually a class and they need to learn.
Mhm.
So the rituals that I build in really help get the students to self-regulate. And it's hard with the first years until they normalize into the routine.
Right.
But we come out and, like, every week we walk the same path. We stop at the same tree. We wait until we get invited to our circle, which is basically a stump circle with a fire pit in the middle. And then when we're in our circle, they know that that's our community time where we get instruction. And then once we get instruction, most weeks, sometimes we don't do it, we do sit spots, which is when they're just by themselves in their spot in nature, and they sit there and write and journal. And I create journals for them on Write in the Rain paper.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that it doesn't matter if it's raining.
Right,
They know that they're still going to be able to do their sit spot. And then when they hear a little bell ring, they come back. And, it's like that ritualistic kind of environment that they have in their classroom. So they remember this isn't playtime. This is actually a class.
Right.
Once we do that, we go into a small lesson, which is very Montessori. Like you do a lesson and then you do an activity and a follow-up. So we'll do a small lesson in our community circle and then we'll go do an activity. Like, for example, we are exploring foraging currently because that's a survival thing. So we've talked about what Native Americans ate, and like last week we were collecting acorns. So we were talking about like how many calories and what they used to cook with it and how do you process them. And so then we had a small lesson and then we went and foraged for acorns. And then over the next few weeks, we're going to actually process the acorns, dry them. I have a dehydrator, dry them,
That's
and we're going to try to turn them into flour. And they're really excited because then they're going to cook over the fire, like in our fire circle. And so I really try to scaffold different activities so that first it's guided and then they kind of go off on their own.
Right.
And the older kids, usually I'll pair them up. I'll say something like, okay, we're going to work in teams. Make sure you have a third, second, first year in your group,
Right.
And so it's, I feel like that reinforces the teaching. Like the students are teaching each other. Because some of these things are things that we have talked about in previous years. And it's coming back and they are able to connect back and make those connections and reflection and be able to share with the younger students. And that's part of it, right?
Right.
Like making that reflective. Yeah.
Well, and I think that like peer-to-peer connections are always so much stronger than even teacher to student connections because they look at their peers a lot differently than they look at us, correct? And then they also have that stronger connection to one another because they're both in this class. And that's what I like about my school is having the multi-level ages. I love seeing that because I can implement that a lot and I really believe in it. So I think it's awesome that, you can do that with your first, second, and third years because I think that that's such a valuable learning experience.
And that age is beautiful because the first years are just like, what is going on? And the third years are like, wow, cool, this is awesome. Everybody come look at this. And I barely have to do anything because they're so curious at that age that the little kids are asking the questions and the older ones are like, well, maybe it's because of this. And then someone else is like, they just feed off of each other.
Well, you have that
and
peer modeling.
You barely have to do anything.
Right.
You might have to jump in and be like, well, what kind of insect is that? And like, then they'll just fire off again. And it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful way of doing like essentially the early science of observation and just being present and noticing things. And
I agree.
And they like being outside. I do take a moment. I know that you said arts and I feel like that's a big deal. So with the little kids, I take a moment to also do like ephemeral art, which is like I teach every year. I tell them what is ephemeral art, and a lot of times we play with mud and we make mud faces on trees, and we will like, especially in the fall when there's a lot of colors, we'll stop and we'll do some sort of like mandala with leaves or as a group or in small group.
Today I had students painting with pokeberries on stumps.
Yeah.
So
we do that. Yeah. We do that a lot too.
And that was totally a student directed thing. So
well, it's interesting to see what they come back from their sit spots because they all go off. The first years are a little closer to camp because they take longer to like walk through the forest because they're smaller, and the second and third years get to go up in the big forest, and we just kind of pace like the two teachers. We walk around the trails, and when some like earlier this year at some point 2 of the girls found pokeberry in their sit spot and their journals came back hot pink. They had smeared it all over the covers, and I was like, let's just let those dry on stumps before we put them back in the box because maybe somebody else might not want their journal to be hot pink.
It is a very bright color. Something that I've been,
Fuchsia.
yes,
That's a better word for it.
something I've been
Fuchsia.
wanting to do, and I meant to do it this year. We still have time, obviously, but I want to see if we can like dye fabrics with it and see.
I love that. Yeah.
Because we've done the art on paper and like we painted stumps and stuff like that, but I feel like because I've had my students now, several of them for 2 to 3 years. That's not something we've done yet, and like maybe even seeing if we can pull some of the different colors from the leaves to use as dye.
So speaking of dyeing things, that seems like a very like a passion project. So
Right.
at the lower elementary project, they're just kind of like learning stuff and they're just absorbing everything. So there is some choice to it. Like if they seem really interested in something, I'll go with it. But really, when the choice starts to come into play is at the next level, which is the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And these students are like super independent. They are no longer like lower primary students are like below them, and they're big kids. Like they want to do things for themselves.
Right.
And so they do a lot of eco-literacy, environmental education within their classroom that I'm not involved, other than suggesting maybe some places that they could go do the work. Like, for example, they do phenology studies, and the students go out to an area and they will sit and observe throughout the year the seasonal changes that are happening in their place in nature that they've picked for the year.
That.
I don't do that with them. They do that in their classrooms.
That's cool.
Then I think they do phenology, or I think it's called Phenology in the Schoolyard, which is an Indiana program where they pick a plant and they document it, and then they have to make a presentation and present it, like do a YouTube, and they get really into that. That's choice, so I don't think that everyone has to do that, but they can choose to do it, and they make wonderful presentations.
Yeah.
I'm always very excited to watch them.
You're usually a lot better with technology than we are.
Yeah. But I have, as part of the related arts rotation, so it's a permanent, just like they go to art and PE and music and theater, they come to eco-literacy class. Every week I have each class for 1 hour. So that is when like we really get creative, and I give them like freedom and choice, as long as they're like following guidelines, which are always respect of self, others, and the environment. As long as they're following those guidelines, I pretty much let them pick what they want to do.
That's awesome.
The upper students have taken the forest. They're kind of the stewards of the forest, so they help keep the trails together. We've built bridges together, which just blows my mind. How again, kind of like Kinder Forest, I stand back and they're like, Jenna, we need hammer, we need screws, we need wood, we need, I think, what are those called? Pulowskis, where you have the blade in the front. I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, okay, let's do a lesson about how to use this safely.
Right.
But like, they are capable and imaginative, and like, you wouldn't know that they built the bridge.
That's awesome.
Because it is sturdy, and granted it took forever to build the bridge, but like, they built a bridge.
Right.
And every time they walk over it, they're like, this is our bridge.
Right.
Like, we built it, and they jump on it, and they all get on the bridge, and they all jump on it, and they're like, it's so solid every time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that goes into like engineering.
Right.
You know, they're sitting there problem solving, and a lot of it is all on them. I literally stand back and do nothing.
Well, I think it's awesome you do that, because I talked about
other than provide tools. Yeah.
Right. I talked about risky play a few episodes ago, and how, you know, as a culture we're getting to the point where we're like safeguarding children to a point where they are losing their autonomy. And the fact that we have taken that from kids, we've really taken their creativity and their ability away to be constructors and have ownership of things. And I think it's awesome that you're doing that, and that's something that we definitely do here. And it's amazing to me
to see what they come up with.
To see what they come up with. And one, like, as long as you're modeling proper safety precautions, like, they want to do this project, so they are going to be safe.
At Oak Farm, we do say that there is freedom with limitations. And so for me, they know, like, during this eco-literacy time, and it really affects the 4th graders a lot, because they're just like the little kids that came in. The 6th graders are very mature. They're like they tell on the fourth graders. They go back to their classroom and they're like, today the fourth graders weren't listening to Jenna. Like,
oh no, yeah.
like, they really self-regulate.
So they have accountability though, because they don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so this is the general guideline for my class in upper eco-literacy is you guys can choose whatever you want to do that we have. So I do give them different activities. I'm like, today we're going to go out and work in the forest. We're going to go work in the garden. We're going to go build a fence. We're going to, you know, whatever it is that we're doing. And they can all choose where they want to be. If they do not take the responsibility to work and be like members of the community and pitch in and not goof off, then they continue to work. But if they choose to break those guidelines, then they're stuck working with whatever I'm doing the following week.
Right.
They lose their ability to choose. And a lot of them don't like that because they might not get to work with their friends, and that's a big deal to them.
It is.
Like to work with their peers and their friends.
Right.
And I love that. Because like, don't you like weeding with your friend?
Right.
Like sitting in the garden chit-chatting while you weed? Like everybody
We
likes
need to make that a thing in my garden.
I'll come weed with you. But they get that. They realize that they want to work with their friends.
Right.
And so they learn how to, the only thing I can call it is self-regulate. Right?
Yeah, like, I would call it that because like, well, and I feel like there's an accountability part to that too, because they don't want to lose that, that perception that their peers have of them, right? Because like children will meet the standards that we're setting for them
if you give them the opportunity to do so.
Yes, exactly.
So they know like Jenna's not going to let us use those tools if we use them wrong.
Right.
Like they'll get taken away. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or she won't offer them up to us, or we'll have to use like the little kid shovel. Like you
right.
know?
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, but within that, it's really beautiful because they come up with ideas and they've created, for example, we, over the last year and a half, we've been building a community garden, which was kind of always there, but we've made it like an actual community garden. The last year, the upper students, it was choice, so they could be in the garden team, and each different class did it differently. So, but at the end of the little timeline that I gave them, different classes had proposed a garden plan to have a community garden, and they had drawn it out. So each class might have had like different proposals where then in their class they picked one they liked the best, and then they brought
they came up with these drafts.
They presented it to a board of teachers.
I love it.
So at Oak Farm we really try to give them authentic audiences.
Yeah.
So that they feel like their work is important and it's like serious work, you know what I mean, for them, because it's very real.
It is.
So this board of teachers is basically a representative from each level that would have a garden, a stake. They're the stakeholders in the garden.
I love that.
And so we had toddler teachers, we had primary teachers, we had the head of the school, we had just all the curriculum director. All these people showed up for the presentation to give them that authentic audience, and they presented their designs and why they picked this and why it was important to have this size bed. It was adorable. Some of them were like, and my little brother's a primary student and I measured his arm and the bed shouldn't be any bigger than this because they can't reach. Like,
and
to
that's
that
a great,
level.
like higher level thinking skill, right?
Yeah.
Like I love that.
That ties very much into like
it does.
STEM, right?
Yes.
Just the problem solving and like trying to figure out like how wide and I believe that one of the classes actually went out and measured all, because we have the primary wheelbarrows, which are tiny, we have the bigger wheelbarrows that we use, and they went out and measured them all to make sure that the pathways were the right width. Awesome. So we could maximize how much space we have for growing, but also, you know, so they presented this, and then of course they also incorporated, and I like that because you talk about the arts and learning how to be part of a community and incorporating these things that make us feel human. And so in this garden they proposed having a gathering place in the middle that was grass, so that they could go sit and read in the garden or go have lunch with their friends in the garden. So they had all the reasoning. So they presented these projects, and then the group of teachers that came literally sat down, and we knew already that we weren't going to pick one. We were going to pick favorites from all of them, because to make them feel like they were all included.
Right, yeah.
Then they all feel like they have a stake in the game.
Right.
So we picked out elements from each one that we loved, and then I created 3 final designs, and then everybody got to vote very democratically. Like all the students, all the teachers, everyone got to vote, and then we just picked the one that got the most votes. And so because they all got elements of their design in there, they were all very excited. They're like, "Oh, that was our idea!" That, you know. And so then we spent the rest of the school year building the garden beds with like real tools. Like they were like, they loved it. We're using drills. We're using, you know. Then they're big, heavy. Some of the bed, I probably wouldn't have designed it this way, but the big beds for upper and lower students were 3 feet wide by 20 feet long. So I'm like,
wow, yeah,
not the most ideal size for a garden bed, but they did it. And I have pictures of like the whole class like carrying these really heavy wooden boxes into the garden. And then I had a dump truck of pea gravel delivered, and they moved it all with. It took forever, but they did it, and they loved it. Then I brought compost from our middle school farm, and they filled up the beds with a mix of compost and dirt and soil and leaves. And so while they're doing this, I'm giving them small lessons as to like, why do we want to cover the pathways with, like, or even coming up, like, what is something that we could do to avoid weeds from just taking over the pathways, you know? So all these elements, they problem solve along the way. They help guide me. Well, sometimes I help suggest things.
Well, as a formal educator, I'm just sitting here and I'm like, okay, they're doing measurement, which I feel like as a teacher, that's one of the hardest things to teach because, or at least it was in public school, because I couldn't give them those experiences. So instead, we're just looking at these rulers with like worksheets and like,
or like graph paper,
right.
Well, that's where it started. It started on graph paper, an idea,
right?
And then at some point, I actually took the 6th graders, because they're learning about the Pythagorean theorem. So I took them out to the garden, and I said, we need to square up the garden so we can lay out the beds right. So we did, in real life, with really long measuring tapes, the Pythagorean theorem of what a 50 foot
Are you guys hearing
by
this?
50
Like,
foot garden. And then they did the math. We sat down and did the math. Okay, so what should the A squared plus B squared equals C squared? Like, how do we do this? And we did that math in real life, and they got to see how this actually gets applied to real life. And I told him, I was like, when houses get built, this is what they do. When it's relevant
learning, and it's going to actually be retained because
they will remember it forever.
Yes.
The time they went out to the garden and used real math.
And don't
to
you
figure
feel
out how
like
to make
as
it
they get
square.
into the higher level math, that it's going to feel less intimidating for them because they have this foundation of a time where they actually applied it and used it
in real life. Yeah, but also, like I can't remember what. Maybe 5th graders were doing area. So like they were figuring out, like at some point I asked them to tell me, like, because we're going to need to know how much dirt I need to bring, or how many yards of gravel do I need to order, how much area are we covering, how deep do we need it to be. Now we're dealing with like cubic feet of gravel. So this is all stuff that they help to figure out. Well, while we were doing this work, and again, like it took us all year to do this work. Right. It was like a year-long passion project of the upper students to build this community garden, which was supported by several different grants.
Yeah,
because it gets really spendy buying wood. And then eventually they proposed. We planted things in the spring, and they were getting eaten up by something. They didn't know what it was. I ended up getting a video of a groundhog eating all the brassicas. That's all they were eating was the kale, the broccoli. All the brassicas were disappearing, and we were stumped. Is it rabbits? What is it? I mean, we have lots of wildlife out there, but it was the groundhogs. Got footage of it. But so, they were like, we should put a fence. We need to fence the garden, So then I worked with our fund developer to get a grant to pay for the fence, because I'm like, I don't have money for a fence.
Right.
So,
but didn't you say, I think we were talking about this group, they will sell some of the goods that they make.
Not at Upper.
Okay.
They want to.
Yeah.
But it's just not where they're at yet.
Okay.
But they're starting to get that, like, oh, we should sell this, you know?
Yeah.
And I have to remind them, I'm like, you guys have 3 feet by 20 feet of garden space. Like, you don't really have a lot of space. This is more like for you guys to like take back to your classroom and make salsa or have a salad.
Yeah.
And they get to pick what they plant. Like,
That's
this
cool.
is guided by the different groups in their garden. And so that comes next.
Okay.
But I remind them that, like, this is work you're going to do in the middle school. Like, this is coming, you know?
Yeah.
And I also remind them this is where that responsibility gets built in of why, well, there's a lot of with the upper students.
Oh,
I remind them, I'm like, you guys are the keepers of this land. If you guys want this garden, it is your garden. It's not mine. It, like, if no one takes care of it, we'll just turn it back into grass, you know?
Right.
And so that really gives them that ownership and drive. And I always tell them it's their legacy. Like, whatever they do is what's going to happen with the students coming up. So, like, if they don't care about the garden and they don't keep it up, or if they don't weed the native little pollinator gardens that we have, like, there's just, it's too much work for one person
Right.
or the maintenance crew to deal with. And so they'll just get turned into, like, grass.
Well, and I think accountability is so important, and like we do need to give kids
that sense
accountability
of ownership. It's
and a sense
ownership,
of-
right?
right.
Yeah.
And accountability doesn't have to be like you have to do this. Like it doesn't have to be a demand, but
Mhm.
telling them that we have these consequences if you're not contributing to this project. And what I find is most students want to, right?
They do.
They
And
want to be a part.
And they love knowing that it is their legacy.
Right.
Like, they're like, this
Because
is
they want
what
to know
we're
what they're
leaving
doing
behind.
matters. Because they see all these
Yes.
adults doing things that matter. And I feel
Yeah.
like kids have just as much drive as adults to have meaning and find that place, right? And value. And I think it's amazing you do that for
The
them.
other thing that they love to do during eco-literacy, and unfortunately it only works out with my second class of the afternoon, because I have eco-lit with upper twice a week, 2 different classes. And so the afternoon classes get the chance to do mentoring with the primary. So the primary outdoor specialist brings little kids
Yeah.
out, and they get to mentor them.
That's
and they get
awesome.
to teach them how to rake leaves, or they get to teach them what's a weed and what's not. And seeing that upper students working with the primary students is just like, they love it.
Oh,
They
yeah.
love knowing that that the primary students are actually looking up to them,
Yeah.
and they can imagine themselves being them. Like in a few years, we're gonna get
Right.
to be, and you know, for a 3-year-old, like a 6-year-old or a 6th grader, is
Right. A grown
a
up.
grown up.
Yeah.
But so I'm creating these opportunities for the older students to teach the younger students, and that is
Mhm.
solidifying. That's almost, you know, it's solidifying
Yeah.
those things that they're learning, because it gives them an opportunity, again, with an authentic audience, to show mastery and understanding.
Well, you're creating lifelong learners.
Yeah.
Really? Like the whole time, like I know as a teacher, that's my biggest fear is like, how do I make these kids fall in love with learning? Even maybe these topics that they have no interest in or,
Yeah.
or just flat out don't like. But you're giving them opportunities, one, to have investment in what they're doing, and then see a future vision if they can stay continuing to do the work that they need to do what they could end up doing. And I think that is a lot of incentive to, you know, have the buy-in.
Yeah.
And that creates
Well, but everybody loves, like, we all take all the levels to the farm, because we have a farm that the
Mhm.
middle schoolers run, and it's like during spring everyone wants to see the babies, like,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
it's like, go see the babies. So they all know that that's coming. So with upper, it's really good to get that buy-in, because they know that next year, if they're 6th graders, or 2 years from now, they are going to have the responsibility and care of real living things. It's
Yeah.
such a big deal to them.
there is nothing like the connection between children and animals.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I know that's a favorite part of my school here is the animals. Like the kids love me, but not near as much as they love the chickens, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I could see some self-regulatory problems in the classroom, but those go away when they're caring for, because they know the chickens are small, they know they're fragile.
Mhm.
And we've talked about how we need to handle them and pick them up. And like even the most rough and tough, you know, impulsive child goes out there and is just delicate and like loving towards these animals, and I love seeing this.
That's something that I really focus a lot of time in lower, is learning how to care for these tiny little things that maybe you might not like spiders, but they play such a big role in our food systems and the webs that are these ecosystems that we spend so much time in. And I always remind them that we are guests here. This isn't where we live, this is where they live. And it's not fair for them to come in and like ruin their homes and ruin you know, and like, so I'm starting to teach that when they're little.
Well, I think that's
so that
good.
once they get older, all like they care deeply and they understand those systems, which is again part of curriculum. Like understanding systems and how those systems work is, I think, probably
well, it's just good citizenship,
the first, second,
right?
third grade.
Because you're teaching them to come into other people's or other things,
and be
spaces,
respectful.
and be respectful. And I think that that's really important.
So then, in upper, they get all this choice, and they come up with these wild projects that I support, and it is really like they are really diving in at this point into that engineering, and that's how they're thinking. They're like, and I've had them ask if they can build like forts, if they can build like a playground. I'm like, that's not really eco-literacy. It has to be like it can't be like just like I'm like, I can't build a play.
We have these parameters we kind of have to stay in,
but they tried. They wanted to build a zip line in the forest recently, and I'm like, I don't know that has anything to do with like eco-literacy.
But it sounds fun.
But they love building. They love at that age. But they do play with. This is the beauty about Oak Farm, is that during playtime they can play like in the schoolyard, ball, in the swings, basketball. But they also have a section of the forest open to them, and they do fort build. Some of the forts, when I walk around in the forest, I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? There's a fort currently in the forest that has 2 rooms, that is 2 levels. Wow. And a group of upper students has been building it and they have willed it. It's hilarious. They have like these whole systems, like societal systems, where a few students have told me that when the students that have been working on it the longest, because it's been years of building this fort, are willing it to the 5th graders that then will be the 6th graders, and they will be in charge of the fort. Like, it's
I love that.
Really fun.
Yeah. Well, that's like such a sense of community. You cannot force that kind of collaboration or respect for one another. Like, that's just naturally happening because of these experiences that you're allowing them to have.
Yeah, and once in a while I'll go out there and make sure it's sturdy, because they do have like, it's a 2-story fort. Wow. But they know. They'll tell me. They'll be like, this section is safe, but we can't climb up here because this isn't sturdy enough. Like, they have that sense of like, okay, well, this whole... And our curriculum director always jokes around and says that when they send their kids to our school, parents know that they're pretty much signing their lives away. Because really, it's... like, if you don't come home dirty, like, you didn't have a good day at school.
Right.
You know?
Learning is messy.
Yeah.
It is.
So then when they move up to middle school, they run a farm, and that's when they are learning how to be independent humans. And so they're exploring running businesses, and they get to come up, again, this is all choice. Aside from the fact that you can't just get rid of the donkeys if you feel like you don't want donkeys this year, like there's a little bit of like inheritance,
right,
and choices that the legacy part of it, you know.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the decisions at the middle school are made as community, with these thoughts of like, okay, like we're moving away in 2 years to the high school. Is this sustainable? Is this a sustainable project? And so when they move up, now eco-literacy looks like running a farm and sustainable agriculture. And we have a greenhouse where we grow things, and we learn about soil science and ag and all sorts of stuff. And it gets very technical really fast.
Yeah.
And we're learning about horticulture and plant propagation, and what are different ways of rooting plants, and how are we going to grow they sell microgreens. They grow and
Yes.
sell microgreens.
Okay. So that's what you were telling me, and I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, because they have figured out this is a fast cash crop. We can grow it in 2 weeks, cut it, sell it, move it out.
Yeah.
Because I always tell them the greenhouse is expensive real estate. We're paying to heat it.
Right.
If they're going to fill it up with things, they need to figure out how to make it. They don't pay for the gas to heat the greenhouse, but it's still a concept.
But it's a life skill.
Yeah, they need to understand that if they're running a business, it needs to be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, granted, we're a non-for-profit, so the students know, and this is the other part that's so beautiful. They sell these things. They have Earth Fest is the big deal for them because they have a huge plant sale, of which they choose every year. I let them choose what kind of plants, and I have a guest speaker come, Jay Roselle from Roselle Landscaping, and he will talk to them about the importance of native plants. We'll have a small lesson day where I have whoever wants to come can come listen to him, and every year the students choose to have native plants in their plant
I choose
sale.
to listen to Jay all the time too.
You should have him as a speaker.
I should actually.
He's wonderful. He's a wonderful educator, and he really just the way he is, he captures them and reels them in, and they all are native plants all the way by the time he's done with them.
That's awesome.
So every year we have this native plant sale, and they have all these other things that they grow themselves in the greenhouse. They spend all year working on it, and then they sell their products, and at some point as a group they decide who to give because they spend their money, so it's not really for profit.
Right.
They feed their animals with the money. They have a lot of animals. They help feed because they do have a farm budget,
right?
Because feed is really expensive, but they know that over the summer when that budget kind of dwindles, Crystal, our farm manager, is going to be feeding the chickens and the animals with microeconomy money. And then they get to pick a charitable organization that they're going to donate money to. So in the month of March, all of their proceeds go to supporting the organization that they've spent a long time figuring out who they're going to support. Last year it was Hives for Heroes.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard of them?
Yep.
They are an organization that teaches veterans how to keep bees for mental health and stress. It's awesome. So they gave all their profits in March and did all these fundraisings to give to their organization.
That's awesome.
And then every year it's different because they pick as a community who they're going to donate to. And they also help pay for their trips that they go on, or
so they're getting even more buy-in because they're helping meet the needs of the animals. They're helping fund their trips.
They care deeply about it.
I'm sure.
And it's wonderful because oftentimes, so I support the greenhouse because that's where I work in the greenhouse. There's other, the farm manager does the barn, and they also do, they call it farm craft, where they make things with, right now we're growing loofahs. They decided they wanted to grow loofahs last year, and so this project has been slow going, but they have loofahs literally taking over the greenhouse.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh, to the rafters.
Yeah, I have loofahs out in my garden, and they take over everything.
So I'm this is this year's greenhouse. They always, at some point, they always grow some vining plant, and I call them the greenhouse monsters. Yeah. Because after a weekend, we come in, and they vined over everything. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, you guys have to detangle these again. Yep. So this year, the loofahs are the greenhouse monsters. But
that's awesome.
They're eventually going to harvest them and give them to the farm crafts. And I think the plan that they have is cut them and make soaps out of them.
Oh, yeah.
Pour soap mix and then sell them in little so they made sugar scrub already that they were sold at Fall Fest, so they think they're gonna make baskets.
That'll be cute.
But they come up with these ideas and we just support their work.
That's awesome.
And get them what they need. And they have, the whole system, they have order forms where if they need something, they'll give it to me. I'll give it to Crystal. She'll order,
that.
They run their own little micro.
So they're they have so many different responsibilities, but they want to make sure they're being responsible and getting these things done because they have a lot of buy-in in this project.
But they've been watching. If they've been Oak Farm kids, they've been watching since they were little. They've been going on field trips to the farm because, like, for the toddlers, it's like a field trip to go to the farm, you know, because it's far away. And they have been waiting to be at the farm, you know. This like the highlight for them is they all love animals, like you were saying. So they end up there, but they do a lot of learning. They're learning about agriculture. We have an FFA program. They do a lot of at that level, I start doing a lot of restoration work with them.
That's
so
cool.
We have our school board has dedicated officially half our land to be in some sort of natural or like restoration state. And so we have like 23 acres of prairie. We have the forest. We have some wetlands that we're working on. We have planted. Now it's going to be years. I keep telling students, when you guys are my age and you come back, this will actually look like, you know, a forest. But those are passion projects that the middle schoolers started. That's actually. Awesome. We've planted an oak hickory savanna over by the primary building, and then we planted a oak hickory woodland over by the high school where they're just baby trees. We planted small trees. Yeah. But one day there'll be other habitats that we have that we've restored. The students worked on. It's like their legacy again. And to this day, like they'll be like, "That's my tree. I planted that." Yep. Yeah.
I love it. And I mean, like, I'm sure we could share so much more, but
it's just like you're gonna have to.
If you know Jenna, you need to go take her to coffee and listen to the amazing things that she's doing with her students. I know it's really inspiring for me because you're giving me some ideas, and I love what you're doing. And I think that these experiences that you're giving kids is so valuable. Yeah. And I love everything you're doing. I mean, everything you're doing is student focused, so it aligns really well with
experiential learning, hands-on,
which we know, like, data has shown works. And I just posted something on my Facebook yesterday about the drastic drop in IQ and academic achievement in students in the last 10 years. And we can't blame the pandemic for that, because it started before that, and it really has to go back with how we're approaching learning. And like, we can't expect students to be sitting at a desk. Worksheets are not valuable learning. They're not really providing actual, I wouldn't even say they're learning, because learning is something that you can use, has real world application, and they just don't. So I think that what you're doing is really, really valuable.
I think there is something to be said about it. You know what I mean? And I feel like at Oak Farm, we always say that we're not just teaching them how to read and write. We're developing the whole child. And I feel like eco-literacy is part of it. Like that environmental education is becoming a whole person. Because, Maria Montessori believed that children should understand their role in nature, truly. And being outside in nature and having the outdoors and the prairies and the forest and all these ecosystems be part of, truly, I tell them, this is your classroom. This is your outdoor classroom. Because it is. And I think that as they develop, they start to see themselves as part of the player. And so hopefully when they become adults and they're running businesses, they start making those better ecological choices.
Well, and I think that, like, not only just that, which is huge, but you're getting the learning done in a very effective way, but we're also helping their mental health, because there's so much data that shows that time in nature not only helps children but adults. So if you're not getting enough nature, you need to go out and get some nature.
But it also is supporting, there's a lot of research that says that students that spend time outside are more successful in their math tests, and they're better writers and readers, and it's just,
well, and you can't love something that you have no experience with. So digging up those blue spotted salamanders, they're going to, it's a memorable learning. They're going to learn about, this, creature, which meets certain science standards, but more importantly, because they've had direct relationship with it, they're going to care about it in a much deeper way.
Yeah. And
right?
so, but that's part of the learning and making those like connections, you know.
Right.
So if we want salamanders, what do they eat, and why do we care about the roly-polies? Like,
Right.
you know,
Exactly.
like,
Exactly. So as you can see, like, it doesn't have to be a complicated thing. So STEAM activities can be, you can do them within your own backyard. So, I mean, Jenna is very lucky that she's at this amazing school at Oak Farm where they have, you know,
A
the
lot of
funding
acres,
and the
yeah.
acreage and things like that. But even within your own backyard, so just some quick examples like what we're doing here. So we only have 2 acres here, but, you know, we turned a chicken coop into a greenhouse, and my students help with, they do a plant cell as well. So they help me start the plants for our plant cell. We have a prairie pocket, so we talk about native plants and pollinators and things like that.
We have a small forest.
We have a
yeah.
small forest, so we are also finding the blue spotted salamanders right now, and making those connections with decomposition and like their role within the forest and why they're important. So you can do all these things too, and I really encourage you to really think deeper about your learning and your teaching, and making sure that students are getting these hands-on experiences, making sure they're student-led, and that it is a really valuable work, which everything Jenna has shared is very valuable work.
And it's a really good way for them to just remember it for forever.
Right,
you know?
exactly.
It's like
The retention.
it's making those pathways.
Yes,
Yeah.
those
So
neural pathways. So
I think, and I have to say, if you don't have a yard that has those things, encourage your children and students to maybe create them.
yeah, I definitely, and there's definitely a lot of public spaces that are willing to let you come in and do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you could always contact your county or even your city council and see if there's spaces that they would let you do things like that, because we
Create
need
a community garden.
right. We
Or-
need more spaces like that.
Or maybe see if your local library wants a prairie pocket you
Right.
guys can plant. Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's funding for stuff like that.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
there is. So, and we'll hopefully be talking about funding and getting grants and things like that in a later episode. But I just wanted to get you guys thinking about all these amazing things, and this is one person, and she's doing it, and like she's amazing.
I feel
But
like
you
I
can
need
do
to
it
multiply
too.
myself. I don't have enough time in the day to do all the things
Right.
I want to do with
Oh
my
yeah,
students.
never. There's never enough. So thank you so much, Jenna, for
You're
joining
welcome.
us.
Thanks for having me.
And I thank you for joining us. And I know this video is a little bit longer than it usually is, but I think that all of this was really important, and I hated to even cut her off where we are. So if you're interested, we could always do a part 2. If you want to hear about what
We
she's
haven't
doing with
even
her
done
high school,
right?
Yeah, if
that's
you're
like
interested,
a whole nother level.
right. So if you're interested in seeing what she's doing with high school, make sure you let me know in the comments below, and we can definitely make that happen. So just thank you so much for supporting us. It would be so helpful if you could like this video and also subscribe to this channel. That would really help. Just also as a reminder, next Monday we actually won't be doing a video. I might be going live. That's kind of tentatively planned, so be watching our Facebook page, the Wild Learners channel, for more information on that. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good night.